Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, and welcome back to another fun, exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host Luke. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good, as per usual. Today is going to be another fun one. Going to be another interesting topic. We're going back, as we did last week, with movie tie-in games to Meet the Robinsons, which you haven't listened to that yet. Please do go back and listen to it. I had a lot of fun with that game, and as a big fan of Meet the Robinsons movie, I hope that people listen to it and enjoy it, as I do with all my episodes. But that one was a real sort of, it meant a lot to me. So hopefully you can go back and check that one out. But today, new week, new episode, new topic. Well, technically new topic, same topic, new week. I'm also going to be doing another movie tie-in today, which is Tron Evolution, which is going to be a lot of fun. But before we get into that, I've got to do the business. As per usual, I want to say thank you to World of Books for sponsoring this episode and for sponsoring the Nerdstalgic show and to kind of helping me do everything that I do here. So thank you to them. And also because they've been so kind, they've also given me a code, as you guys know. So if you go to checkout and type in nerdy10 at checkout, you save yourself 10% off any and all of your orders for anything on their store, from secondhand books to vinyls to video games, movies, for all different platforms. Check them out and save yourself 10% off at checkout using the code NERDY10. That's NERDY10, or higher case, and save yourself 10% off. So once again, thank you to World of Books for sponsoring the show. Now, yes. I'm a bit sort of wired today. It's Sunday. I'm recording this, so I'm a mix between tired and ecstatic, as I am for every episode that I record. So if I do get a bit tongue-tied and I do sort of repeat myself, I do apologise, as always. I'm very apologetic today. I'm very well, it's not the word, not lethargic. What's the word? I'm very sort of loosey-goosey. I feel tired, but I'm not tired. You know what I mean? I think I'm just fighting it. I'm at a constant battle with that fatigue, and it'll hit me eventually. But hopefully, it'll hit me after I do this episode. One thing I do want to say before I get into it is that follow me on Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod for any and all updates on new episodes that I'm looking at, topics, games that I'm playing, movies that I'm watching, ideas, concepts, that sort of thing, and also bit of dialogue, bit of conversation. If you follow me on Twitter, then you'll get up-to-date knowledge of everything that I do and when I do it and when I'm going to post and all that jazz. So follow me on Nerdstalgic_pod on Twitter just to get all the latest and everything and all that. So now all that side's done, we actually get on to the topic of the day. So as I mentioned, I'm doing another movie tie-in game. This one, as I mentioned again, is Tron Evolution. I had a lot of fun with this one, mainly because I'm a big fan, and not just because I'm a nerd, right? And this kind of brings back to the whole point of the podcast. The whole point of me doing this is the nostalgia part of it. The whole thing of Nerdstalgic is that you do the nerdy side, but also you have the nostalgic side, right? And this is very much nostalgic for me, in respect to I'm a big fan of the original movie Tron from Disney, and I'm a big fan of Tron Legacy, which I still to this day feel that Tron Legacy deserved a sequel. I know Tron Legacy is a sequel, but I wanted a sequel to that movie. I wanted a good trilogy of Tron movies to end it all really, really well. Because that last movie ends on a cliffhanger. Maybe in the past, maybe in the future. Well, get my words out, Luke. Maybe in the future I will go back and look at those movies and review them. But I have deep love for the Tron franchise, and if you ask me my personal opinion, I feel that Disney has squandered the Tron license completely. They have a license that would work so perfectly, absolutely, positively, perfectly in the modern world, in the modern age that we live in, with technology and hacking and advanced AI and virtual reality and computer systems and all that jazz. The idea of it was cool back in when it was created back in the 80s, where you had this sci-fi concept of supercomputers and a world inside a computer and being sucked inside it, right? That was a high concept and very sort of high sci-fi. But it works more so with today, especially with Tron Legacy. Again, I will do a review of these movies potentially in the future, most likely next year. So look forward to that one when I get around to it. But I feel like in a modern setting, it would work perfectly. But especially nowadays, like I mentioned, with all the rise of technology that we have, that if they found a way to capitalize on that, I think that it would do really, really well. The problem is with Disney, and I've mentioned this many, many times in the past, is that they work at loss and gain. Where other companies, if it makes a bit of a loss, other companies, depending on how big the loss is, they will go, well, you know what, we'll make a sequel because maybe the sequel we can improve on what went wrong in the first one and then hopefully recoup the money back. Where Disney, it's very much the fact of no matter if it lost a little bit or if it lost a lot, um, Disney would just go, that's it, we'll scrap it. Nobody was interested on it. It obviously failed because it didn't make back, as much money as it was to make it. Then we're just gonna sort of give up on it and move on. And I get it; it's a business and all that, but very much it kind of means that great movies like John Carter of Mars, which was a fantastic movie, but happened to be affected by bad marketing, that movie failed, even though the John Carpenter series of books are absolutely fantastic bit of sci-fi, and the movie itself with Taylor Kitsch again was also very, very good. Very, very. I would even go as far as say it was quite fantastic, and that would be another movie that would be fun to review in the future as well. But yeah, with Tron Legacy, it failed. It didn't do very well, so Disney have gone, well, we won't make any more. But before that, they made a video game to tie in to the um, with the newest movie. Now, before I get on to the story and that, I'll do that in the proper review itself. I just want to say that Tron Evolution is a very, very well done game. I very much enjoy it. It's a prequel to Tron Legacy, because that's a sequel. I kept almost calling this Tron Legacy, and I realized no, this is Tron Evolution. This is the prequel. Technically, if anything, if you want to put it in chronological order, you have the movie Tron, then you have Tron Evolution, then you have Tron Legacy. So if anything, Tron Legacy is the third movie, technically, if you're looking at the canon-wise story. But it isn't, but it is, because most people probably wouldn't have played this game, because apparently from my research this game was a bit of a flop. It didn't sell very well, and the problem again with Disney, if whatever they make doesn't do very well, no matter how beloved it is or how much people want more of it, they will either put it straight to DVD or they will just cancel it completely. That's just how Disney works. And it's funny because Disney makes so much money and owns so many properties and so much capital that you'd think that they could afford a loss on a movie or game or whatever. But every single thing they do, if it doesn't make a success, if it's not a success, they will not carry on. And I don't like that. But that's one of the things I don't like about Disney, especially as a fan, that they do this. But that's my 2 cents. Again, when I get around to talking about Tron 1 and Tron 2 and John Carpenter of Mars in the future, I will talk more about this topic. But trust me, that's one thing that really aches me about Disney, is how they do that. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, you're not here for that. You're not here for my Disney rant. I just thought I'd throw that in there. What you're here for is my review of Tron Evolution. So, as we always do whenever we do movie tie-in games, one thing I always love to do to begin with is to give you a description of the front and back of the box. So, on the front of the box, we've got a big Tron, the Tron logo, which is a copy of the logo that's on the Tron Evolution poster, which actually looks incredible. I love the design of this. So it's Tron Evolution, and then you've got the program that you play as on the front, throwing one of the light discs. I love Tron, and the reason I love Tron is because it's just completely untapped potential. It is something that worked when it came out and would work even more now. The more we advance as a species, the more technologically advanced we get as a world, as a culture, as again as a species, the more this movie makes sense. If you know what I mean, the more this idea, this IP just works, the better it gets, the more we can relate to it. You know what I mean? It becomes less sci-fi, more realistic. You know, more realism. But that's the front of the box. Obviously, PG-13, Disney, blah blah blah. And then on the back, we've got Welcome to the Grid program. Enter the world of Tron as Kevin Flynn's newly created security program and protect the grid from an enemy unlike any seen before. Then we've got a few shots of the game. It goes explore the world of Tron using free running mobility on your epic adventure across the grid. Battle new and ruthless enemies in intense light disc combat and thrilling light cycle chases. Seamlessly connect from story mode into 10-player online battles and fight for control of the game grid. This game does have a multiplayer system. No, I haven't been able to play it because sadly, one of the downsides of playing old games like this is that majority of the multiplayer systems, the servers are off. So the only way to play it would be to play it 2-player online multiplayer co-op. Sadly, I haven't had the time to sit down with my brother as I usually do to play the multiplayer. But a lot of the multiplayer sort of games you actually experience in the game. You know, you've got the light cycle sort of races that you can do, very much like the game and like the movie, where you have to race around a grid and try to. It's kind of like playing a big game of Snake, where you've got your light trail behind you, and you've got to cut people off and kind of make them crash. And it's kind of last man standing. You've also got light discs battles where you're on two people, and one guy's on one side, you're on the other, and you've just got to bounce your light disc off the walls and basically hit them and take them out. It's quite cool, quite interesting. Again, it works fantastically, not just within the world of Tron, but it works fantastically in a video game because again, this is the whole point of Tron. This is what Tron is. Tron is a video game. You know, it's a video game that was made by Flynn, by Kevin Flynn to like it's like a new sort of video game, new world. That's what he is. He's a game designer, and that with while programming, he ended up accidentally creating a living, breathing program, a world within a video game, and that's why it works. And it kind of baffles my mind. Again, it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning, how that Tron is an untapped potentiality from Disney, because it not just works fantastically in the medium of a movie, but also works fantastically in the medium of a video game, because it is a video game, so it's a game based off a movie, right? So everything in it works fantastically for a video game setting, because that's the whole point of the movie. If you get what I'm saying, I know I've kind of confused myself a bit there. So everything that you get to do in multiplayer just kind of works. And again, I'll get onto it more when we actually get to the main review. But that's the sort of gist of what you get from the front and back of the cover. If I open it up, there's nothing on the inside. There's no sort of like reverse cover, sadly. You've got your manual, standard manual, and it goes through the controls and it tells you about a bit more information about the story mode. So welcome to the grid program. Immerse yourself in the world of Tron and dominate your digital opponents using high mobility combat while unleashing devastating light disc attacks. Master the iconic light cycle, and when you're ready, test your skills online in the game grid. You got the story mode. Become Anon, a prototype system monitor programmed from the great user himself, Kevin Flynn. Unlock the mysteries of the Tron universe while trying to stop a corrupt program determined to change the fate of the grid forever. And that just gives you a bit more about the gameplay, about sort of the opponents you can deal with. You've got there's a upgrade system in this, so you can get disc mods, upgrade your disc powers to make them more powerful or defensive. You've got your game grid enhancements, purchase specific upgrades to enhance individual or team performance in your game grid loadout. Software upgrades increase your health, your energy reserves, or ability to absorb energy from the world. And you've got your light cycles, upgrade to alternate light cycles from the game, so you can have the light cycles that you see in Tron Legacy, or you can go revert back to the Gen 1, the original light cycles that you see in the first Tron movie. This game has RPG elements. As you play through the game, you level up, and at each time you level up, you get like 2 gigabytes. I think it's gigabytes or megabytes, but basically how it works is that the more, let's just call them megabytes for argument's sake, the more megabytes you have, you can then spend that currency on upgrades like health upgrades, disc mods, to make the game a lot easier. So you can get health regain, or you can make you've got like certain like abilities, certain sort of discs. So you've got a corrupt disc where it kind of, when you hit your enemies, they will start to leech health, and virtually they eventually will die. The more sort of you attack them, the more health you drain from them. You've got your disc bomb, which is again quite explanatory. You use that to break down walls and to make huge sort of arcing explosions. So you can kind of, if you get swarmed, which you do quite a bit in this game, it kind of makes a big shockwave and takes all the enemies around you. You've got a heavy disc, which is a slower to throw, but has a lot more damage to hit. And then you've got a stasis disc, which works very much the fact of kind of like the bomb disc, where you can throw it on the ground, it blows up, and then kind of slows all the enemies down. So you can easily switch to your light disc and obviously get a good few quick hits off your enemies and kill them a lot quicker. Then he goes on about light cycles. You get to drive a tank in this as well, because what game doesn't need a tank level in it? Who doesn't love a tank level? A bit more about Xbox Live connecting, that sort of thing. One thing I love about this manual, which I know you can't appreciate it as much as I can, because obviously this is an audio format, not a visual format. But one thing I love about a manual, and I've said this many times whenever I've spoken about movie tie-in games or even video games in general, is that I love a manual. I miss manuals in general. I understand why they no longer have manuals because of recycling and wanting to be more green. I get that, and I completely understand, and I agree with it. But the old sort of nostalgia part of me misses having a manual. And one thing I love about manuals is when game creators decide to do the manuals in color, because majority of manuals that what we got when we were younger were all in black and white. So whenever you got a manual that was in color, it just made it feel more real. It felt like a companion piece. It felt like a companion book. It's like, I've told this story many times, that when I went to like a game shop or game store, whatever you want to say, I would go there with my dad. I'd pick out a game, and while we're driving home, I would open it up, and I would always read the manual, read what the story's about, what I can do in the game, that sort of thing. And I would do it as well before I even bought the game. I would sit and I would read the manual, just to see if it was interesting. I would read the back of the box. I would read the manual inside of the box. That's if it was in there, because not all sort of places kept the manuals in the boxes. Sometimes they would take the disc and sort of the what's the word, manual out. But I always loved it when they were in color, because it just felt like I had another level of immersion to the world, really, which was really, really nice. One thing that makes me laugh in this as well, before, because this is a big manual, but like the reason it's so big is because it's in different languages. What I love, by the time you get to the end of the English part of it, is a big sort of one whole cover that's just dedicated to a poster for Tron Legacy. Disney Digital 3D in select cinemas. In cinemas December the 17th. Doesn't give an actual year, but then again, I would imagine that it wouldn't need a year. And then on the back of it, you've got Relive the Legacy with Tron Toys. And you've got all the different figures, 7.5-inch figures, RC, zero gravity light cycle, vehicle assortments compatible with 3 figures, action figures, vehicles, role play players, and zero G RC. And then you've got Sam Flynn identity disc. I didn't even know there were toys out for this movie. God, I really missed out. I would have loved to have some of these toys. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about toys. That is a complete in-box review of Tron Legacy as it is. I got this at a car boot, I think, and the lady wanted £3. Now I'm sort of kind of thinking that I should have haggled down a bit. Not that the game's not worth it or anything like that. It's just when you're at a car boot, you should haggle a bit. And I didn't haggle as much as I should do with this game. Really, I should have asked her for like £2 or even £1.50. But no, I paid £3 for it. It's in good condition. Most likely going to give it to my brother now after I do this review, so he can give it a play, as I do with all the games that I get from a car boot. all the games that I review here, after I'm done with them, apart from Wall-E, because I have a great sort of connection, not just it being my favorite sort of Pixar movie, but also my favorite. I had a lot of, not my favorite, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I had a lot of fun and struggles with the Wall-E game, as you would know if you listened to that episode. If you haven't listened, go back and listen to my Wall-E movie tie-in game review. That was one hell of a time playing. That was a slog. That game generally was a slog. But majority of the time, whenever I get one of these games, once I've played them and completed them and reviewed them, I'll give them to my brother. So this will be going to my brother for him to play. And yeah, so that's the box and complete, the front and back of the box and the inside of the box. Time to move on now, after we have a quick break, to talk about the studio that actually made this game, Propaganda Games. So I will meet you back here in a minute. Right, so on to Propaganda Games. Well, to be honest, there's not a lot to say about them really. They weren't around for a very, very long time. They were founded in 2005 and they closed down in January 2011. There's not really like I said, they wasn't around for a very long time, but I'm going to try my best to kind of make it sound as much interesting as possible. So, Propaganda Games was a Canadian video game development studio based in Vancouver, British Columbia, founded by Josh Holmes in 2005 and bought by Disney Interactive Studios, the interactive subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. At the same year, in January 2011, Propaganda Games was closed. Benura Vista Games formed the new studio with former employees of EA Canada in April 2005. They acquired the Turok license in May 2005, which was released in 2008 for the current generation consoles at the same time. A sequel, Turok 2, wasn't developed soon after but was cancelled due to layoffs. Once work was completed on Tron Evolution and the proposed Pirates of the Caribbean title was cancelled, Disney closed the studio in January 2011. So they weren't around for a very, very long time. They only made 2 games, and the other 2 games that they were going to make were all cancelled. So the first game they made, which was released in 2008, was Turok, which was a first-person shooter. It didn't do very well commercially, if I remember correctly. The game was a flop, but it made enough money back for it to be considered to have a sequel. That, enough money was made back where they could go, well, what would a sequel look like if we did it? How could we improve upon it? So it didn't fail that bad, but it was still, as I said before, in Disney's eyes, as a bit of a failure. It was actually the first games I actually played on my dad's Xbox 360 when he got it, because there was not many games that was out for the system at the time when it was released. It was one of the first few games that I remember playing and enjoying. It was really, really hard. But then again, I was a lot younger. I think it's backwards compatible now on the Xbox Series X. I'm not sure. But I have fond memories of that game, even if it didn't do very, very well. And then they did the next game after that was Tron Evolution, which is the game I'm reviewing today. That came out in 2010. Obviously, I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And then they have the other 2 games that were cancelled. So you've got Pirates of the Caribbean, Armada of the Damned, which is a game which is a cancelled action-adventure role-playing video game that was developed by Propaganda Games for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Windows platforms. Originally set to be published by Disney Interactive, it was the first attempt to create an open-world game based on the Pirates of the Caribbean film franchise. The project was cancelled in October 2010, soon before the closure of Propaganda Games. Set before the events of The Curse of the Black Pearl, the game was to follow James Sterling, a pirate captain whose main mission was to travel across the Caribbean Sea to make a reputation for himself. Although little was unveiled about the story, it was intended to be an independent from the film's main arc and include new characters. Gameplay was to have emphasis on role-playing elements, including real-time combat and weapon customization. After it was announced at the 2009 E3 demo, the game received positive responses from most of the video game journalists. Damon Hatfield from IGN thought it's a promising action RPG, while Games Radar praised the gameplay, comparing it to the Assassin's Creed franchise. Journalists were disappointed when Disney cancelled the game several months before its planned release date. Ubisoft, the publisher of Assassin's Creed, later released a similar game called Assassin's Creed Black Flag. So if it did come out, it probably would have contended with Black Flag. But that being said, I've actually done a bit of research into this game a couple of years ago in the past, and it seemed something that would be very, very interesting. I managed to find a few gameplay snippets here and there. And I think it would have been really interesting to have a Pirates of the Caribbean-esque sort of game, which I love the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise as it is. And then to kind of add on the RPG elements, which I love role-playing games, set it, before the events of the Black Pearl, have its own story, but it's set in the same world, same universe, and just expand it. Sounds actually fantastic. And seeing that the work that they managed to do for this game, granted they stumbled with Turok, fair enough, right? But that was them sort of cutting their teeth, seeing where they stand, seeing what they could do, right? So I don't judge them for that game. Tron Evolution was a major upgrade. It was, again, when I get onto the review, I'll go into more detail, but it was something that was just better. It was just more interesting, more fun, overall fantastic, right? So it would have been nice to see what they did with another franchise. If they took, well, you did, you stumbled a bit with Turok, but it wasn't that bad much of a failure. You did really, really well with Tron Evolution. What can you do now with Pirates of the Caribbean? You know what I mean? So I thought that would have been interesting. As I mentioned, they had planned to do a Turok 2, but I couldn't find anything on it. I think that game, it started development long after, as most games usually, sequels usually do, that during the end of, or even the middle sometimes, of the first game being made, the plans are already being drawn up and thought of what the sequel would be. I don't know what that sequel would have looked like, considering that the Turok itself, the game story was a bit convoluted and was a bit very, very strange. So I have no idea as to where it would have gone if it was to go anywhere. But I would have liked to see a sort of a next gen sort of Turok game, for them being like, you know what, first game didn't do very well, but Tron Evolution, was kind of well received. It wasn't overly hated. Yes, it didn't sell very well, but it was well received. We made a Pirates of the Caribbean RPG game. Let's Say, for example, that did quite well. So let's sort of give it a go. Let's sort of try our sort of next gen Xbox One. You know what I mean? Let's make Tron 2 for the Xbox One, and let's harness the power of that console, and let's just really go for it. I don't know. I'm merely speculating, but I don't know. I feel like I enjoyed Turok enough where I would say I wouldn't mind playing another one of their games. I have now played their next game that they made. I enjoyed it very, very much. Yeah, I will say that I would have liked to see where they go next, what they would have done next. And it's a shame that, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the way Disney are, that if something doesn't perform the way it should do, or if it fails, or X, Y, and Z, then Disney are very much on the line of, well, it failed. It didn't do as well as other things that we've got on. Even though we're $1 billion company, we can't afford to lose. So we cancelled it, and then we shut down the whole studio, which is a shame. But I do hope that all those developers managed to find themselves on their feet with other sort of companies and are now making fantastic games. Who knows whatever they're doing, but fingers crossed there. So that is a sort of a brief sort of background into the developers of the game, Propaganda Games. Now I'm actually going to get onto the actual review itself. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Right, so finally onto the review. So to begin with, we're going to talk about the story and the plot. It's a short adventure. This one, if I was to add up my hours, I think this is like a 3 to 4 hour long adventure. Actually, I would even say, if you just blitz through it, if you played it on easy mode, probably about 3 hours long. If you was to try to find the collectibles at the same time, you're looking at another hour, so over about 4 hours long. If you the difficulty, because this game, even on casual, as I always try to do whenever I do my reviews, is that I'd like to play the game on different difficulties so I can kind of get a better feel. Because I feel like the harder the game, like the higher the level that you play the game on, the more of the game sort of features you actually get to see. So you get to see like the combat, for example, the higher difficulty that you play on, you actually see if the AI is quite clever, if it tries to flank you, if it's unforgivingly hard for no reason, or if it's quite smart and unforgiving that way. So I'd say if you was up the difficulty of it, you would be looking at, depending on how good you were at the game, again, you'd be looking at 4 to 5 hours potentially. But this is a very sort of short game. It's not a very long one. To be honest, I would say that the campaign is second to the multiplayer. That you can tell that because one of the things about games around this time, and I've mentioned this a few times now, is that when we started going onto the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, everything had to have an online mode. For even like the basic games, like these movie tie-in games, that only like a small niche of people were going to buy. These weren't going to like, no one was going out to buy Ratatouille. No one was going out to buy Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs on the Xbox 360 and that sort of thing. But these games, they had multiplayer because that was just the thing. Because there were going to be people out there who were going to buy it, even if it was only going to be a small niche of people. People are going to go out and buy these games. So, let's put a multiplayer thing in, because even if the game's not very long or that good, we might get a lot of graces of people being like, oh, the game's not great, but I'm going to buy it for the multiplayer because, the multiplayer's the best thing I ever played in my life. It's that kind of mentality. I'm glad that we don't follow that mentality nowadays, but that was kind of the kind of reason of a lot of games, why they had sort of multiplayer, was that it would shorten the campaign but also give you more sort of features elsewhere. So that's why the campaign is quite short. But as I mentioned, the story follows you. You are a new security program made by Flynn Rider. Kevin Ryder, not Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider's from Tangled. Kevin Ryder. Well, actually, Kevin Flynn. Because I just looked at the back of the box and realised that I've been calling him Flynn Rider. It's Kevin Flynn. Or just call him Flynn. You were created by Flynn to basically patrol and to keep an eye on the sort of grid of the program while he's not there, and that Clue, his alter ego, his program that Flynn designed to look like him, but also to be the monitor again while Flynn is not there. Basically, if you watch Tron Legacy, you will know. Basically, goes crazy, realizes that it was kind of like The Incredibles, where he becomes smart enough to realize that he doesn't need to take orders from anybody else, and that what he ends up doing is that he sees these this new beings, this new form of life, this new form of creation in the story of the ISOs. They're a new program that kind of is sentient, and that Clue sees them as a virus, as an abomination, as something that shouldn't exist, so shouldn't be. So because they shouldn't be, again, he's a program, he only works off logic. So Clue is very much the fact of, well, we just need to destroy them, which then sort of starts the war of the programs against the ISO, and that the ISO are basically getting demolished, getting destroyed, because they're very peaceful sort of beings. They don't do war. They don't do death and destruction and killing. They just kind of want to exist, really, because that's what they are. They're like children. They're new to this world. They don't know anything other than what they can see in front of them. So where Flynn is trying to bring them in and trying to wants to present them to the world and present them to humanity of a new form of life that he's created and he's found. Clue is very much the overarching sort of program where it's like logically makes no sense. So because logic doesn't determine that these don't make sense, that they don't, and so that I'm going to destroy them, and that kind of sets up the whole sort of Tron Legacy movie. But I mentioned this is the prequel, so it's set before that. So the game basically follows you going from grid to grid, area to area, little cities, little colonies, destroying the corruption, chasing down Clue to kind of stop him from basically killing all the ISOs. And that's the story, that's the plot. It's only a short story, like I said, it's not a very long one, but it's fun, it's interesting, and I enjoy it, more so as a fan of Tron. Like I mentioned, I see this as a sort of short adventure, short story, sort of like a prelude, a prequel to Tron Legacy. So you would watch Tron, you would play this game, and then you would watch Tron Legacy, and that would give you a good sort of feeling of how the story's evolved, how the story's changed. Because when you meet Kevin Flynn, character in this one, he's still young. He's still very much looking as he did in the first Tron movie. So this is obviously set in the past, and then when Tron Legacy comes about, Kevin Bridges is very very old. Now, obviously, he was old in general, but like you can tell time has passed. So what happened in the events of this game reflects how and where we are at the beginning of Tron Legacy. So it ties in very very well and actually works quite well as a sequel prequel, and I do enjoy it very much so. As for the gameplay, lots of fun. I had a real ball with this game. I actually ended up sort of trolling a friend of mine because a friend of mine he's a big sort of fan and gamer of Call of Duty and Halo and stuff like that, and he always sort of shares things and posts things whenever those games break or whenever they fail, or that guns are too overpowered and a patch needs to be released, and basically fixing it. And I was basically trolling him like, "Oh, you don't get that in Tron Evolution. Tron Evolution works as it's meant to work. You know, the combat is quite fluid. No need to do any balancing. The game works fine. You know." So I was trolling because I was generally having a lot of fun. This game is a blast. It's a real ball. You know, the combat is tight and challenging at times. It's a lot of fun. You know, again, you use your light disc. You have different sort of forms of light disc. You've got your stasis disc, as I mentioned, that sort of freezes and slows down enemies. You can actually upgrade it so it completely freezes them on the spot, so you can get a few in cheeky jabs before they can move. You've got your heavy disc, which again is hot, is as you know, as it says on the tin. It's a heavy disc, so you throw it a lot slower than you would your light disc, but it has a huge amounts of damage. You have your corruption disc, which then sort of leeches life and off the enemies and slowly starts to decay them and kill them. And then you have there's another one that I feel like I'm. Oh, you have your bomb disc, which again, as it sounds, you can do huge shock waves and you can throw bombs at enemies and it would kill them, and it would kill huge groups of them. So there's different sort of ways you can do it. You tie that into the platforming, which reminds me of very much of the Prince of Persia, even if it's not as smooth or responsive. There are many times in this game, pardon me, where genuinely I screamed and chose to rage quit, not because the game was hard, not because of any sort of level or boss fight was annoying, even though some of the fights were a bit annoying and a bit repetitive. The moments that got me wanting to just turn this game off was the free running sort of platforming. Was that when it worked seamlessly and it worked fantastically. But when it had moments of not being very very responsive, then it was very annoying. Because I'm an old fan of the Prince of Persia games. I love those games. I was a hardcore Prince of Persia fan for that long that I refused to play Assassin's Creed because I knew that Assassin's Creed was cannibalized from a potential Prince of Persia sequel, and that I just couldn't find. I was that much of a diehard that I couldn't find myself going back to Assassin's Creed for a long time, and I didn't. I didn't go back to Assassin's Creed till a Black Flag, so it was a very, very long time I didn't play that series because I was that much of a diehard game. But I will admit, even with Prince of Persia, that even they weren't always responsive. That there were times where you asked the prince to jump in a certain direction, and he wouldn't. Right, so I'm not saying those games were perfect, but they were a lot smoother and more responsive than this. So even though this platform reminds me of Prince of Persia, it needed a bit more ironing out. It needed a bit because there were moments where like this game has sort of you climbing up walls and you would climb a wall and you would jump from one wall to the next. Now, in most games that have that feature, you'd climb to the wall, the character would stop for like a brief, like 2 seconds, kind of in that position, and then you can jump from wall to wall, right? Because if the problem is, if you was to jump while you were climbing, you would always get the height that you need to get to the next one. So when you started climbing that one, eventually you wouldn't have enough height to kind of grab the ledge and you'd fall down. That's why games have that system where you climb the wall to the high as it would go, the character would stop, and you've got about 2 second window to press the A button to jump to the next one and repeat until you get to the ledge. In this game, it's literally you climb up the wall, and if you don't press A, like there's no pause, there's no effect of climb up, pause, give you a quick amount of time to jump. It's climb up the wall, and if you don't press A while you're climbing, the character would just drop. So many times that happened to me, and I've had to redo these things again. There's other ones where you climb onto these little ledges that glow, and you've got to jump from side to side. The problem is, if you try to jump behind you, if you don't have the trigger pointing down at the time, the character will just jump up and climb up the wall. And then when it falls, it won't always fall and grab the ledge that you were just on. Sometimes it will pretend that it wasn't there. There were many moments where the platforming failed me. That being said, when it worked and you had it in tandem with combat, it worked. There were many times where I was doing moves where I was climbing up walls where enemies were chasing me. I'd free run up a wall, jump off the wall, target an enemy, and I'd press Y. And when you press Y, you had like an insta kill where you could throw your light disc at an enemy and it would just kill them instantly. So I had many moments where I would jump up, get behind them, throw disc at them, or I'd throw one of the bomb grenades and it would kill many of them. Because you do get swarmed in this. You have to do the platform. Like, you can stand still in this game, but you get many times where you get many enemies where they have light discs too. So they'll be throwing light discs at you. So you can't really run away because they will be throwing light discs at your back and you take damage. So you kind of have to stand your ground. With the enemies with the light discs, again, it comes up with combat. You can sort of, if you're lucky and you press the X button at the right time, you can sort of deflect their disc back to them and either destroy them completely with one hit kill or take down their damage. Or you can use the platform in the free running to run up the walls, to get behind them, and to either do a stasis effect where you slow them down, throw a bomb at them, do a heavy attack, do a corruption, whatever you want to do, whatever your play style. You get different types of discs. So however you want to play the game, you are free to play it. You get given the tools, and you get set in this Tron world, and it's just like you're gonna get swarmed with enemies, but that's okay. Generally, just play how you want. It kind of put you in this little sandbox arenas. Each level's like a little arena. You have a bit of platforming section. Then you'll have these little arenas where you get loads of different types of enemies in. Some enemies with shields, some enemies with like they're not bamboo sort of things, but like sticks. But they're not sticks. They're like big sort of long sort of baton bamboo sort of. I'm blanking on the name of what they're called, but it's kind of like when you were a kid, you'd have like the broom and you'd unscrew your broom and you'd just be left with like the broom hilt and you'd pretend to be like a martial arts expert. One of those basically, but more sort of Tron-y, sort of technologically advanced sort of stick. And you can't throw your light disc at them. You have to get behind them, so you've got to do a lot of wall running up behind them, jump behind them, hit them in the back. Because if you throw it directly at them, they're just going to deflect it with their stick. So you have to play differently. Again, it ties in with the upgrades as well. You upgrade your certain moves, you upgrade your health, you upgrade the abilities that you can do, the new abilities, new moves, that sort of thing. It all works in tandem. And again, when the platform is not being janky, it just works, and it's a fun game. It's not too difficult, it's not too hard. You get a choice between the difficulties that you play. When I played this game, my first run through of it, I played it on the easiest difficulty, mainly so I could run through it. I could just get the review done, get the bulk of the game, understand the mechanics of it. Then I went back for a second time and I played it on the different difficulties just to see how it would be. Again, same experience, but because I'd played the game already, I already knew how the mechanics worked, and I already had all my unlocks, and I already knew how to use certain abilities, certain discs, and how to defeat certain enemies. So it was less challenging. But I found that on the high difficulty, because the enemies had high health, I had to keep moving. It was like playing Sunset Overdrive on the Xbox. If you played Sunset Overdrive, that's one of those games that's based off momentum. The whole point of the game is to kind of grind. It's like Jet Set. It's like Jet Set Radio. You have to grind off the rails. You've got to you've got to keep moving, because the moment you start standing still, that's basically you just die, because the enemies just swarm you and you get destroyed. So on the higher difficulties, the whole point of the game at that point is just to keep moving. There's certain sort of points on the wall that are lit up where you can wall run on them, and they will regain health on you. Then there's little bits of platforms that will glow white and will have a bit of sparks coming off them. You can jump off them and you can kind of propel yourself from one part of the arena to the next, while also kind of that will recoup some of your energy, because the more energy that you have, the more sort of super combos you can sort of pull off, and then you can have more devastating effect on your moves. So you have that effect as well. So on the high difficulty, the gameplay gets a lot more intense, a lot more tight, and a lot more challenging. The game, the game's just generally really fun. It's backwards compatible on the Xbox. I was playing it on my Xbox Series X. I'm playing it on the next gen. So I've got auto HDR. The game runs incredibly smooth. There's no sort of screen tearing. It just works. It's just, again, it's beautiful. And like, even though this was a game from 2011, it looks gorgeous. And I'm not just saying that because I'm playing it on a next gen sort of console and I'm playing it on a decent TV. Generally, this game just looks fantastic. And again, it pains me when I was playing it. There were many moments where it pained me of like, this game looks so good now, of like how good a next gen Tron game would look. Like, if you was to play a game on the Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5 that that was like this game, but it was just like modern graphics, Unreal Engine 5, whatever you want to say, or whatever engine you want to put in, and just to run it, this game would be gorgeous. A Tron game in Unreal Engine 5 would just be orgasmically beautiful, right? And again, it pains me that Disney are not doing anything with it. Now, there is a Tron game that I know of that is going to be released soon. When I say soon, I think next year. But that's a point and click adventure sort of game. So it's not sort of, the free roaming sort of RPG sort of game that I'm playing. What I've played recently with Tron Evolution. But I'm glad that there's going to be another Tron game coming out soon, which I will play and I will review and I will enjoy, I'm sure. But I want a next gen game like this that's modern graphics, new sort of features, new sort of mechanics. I think it would just work wonderful. Work absolutely wonderfully, brilliantly. I have nothing but positive words to say about this game. It is generally a joy, and maybe it's the nostalgia talking. Maybe it's the sort of rose tinted glasses because I have so much love for the Tron franchise, and again, I have so much pain that Disney aren't doing anything with it. But it's just nice to play a modern Tron game um, in on my next gen sort of system, and it just looking gorgeous. And it's just not, again, it's just nice. It's just a good feeling as a fan. Um, so that's the gameplay. The story's all right. The story's good. Again, it's quite short, but the multiplayer sort of takes over. But again, a lot of the things that you do in the multiplayer, like I mentioned, you do that in the main story anyway. The lights, you have light cycle moments where you get to race around on your light cycle. That was a bit difficult because um, the bike goes incredibly quickly, and as you get further on into the game, most of the time when you're on your light cycle, you're being sort of attacked by I can't remember what they're called now, which is really bad because I've just said I'm a big Tron fan, but like I can't remember what they're called, but it's like the giant sort of flying. I like to call them the flying Ns, really, or the flying M's. The big things that fly. They're dive bombing you, so they're basically disintegrating the track in front of you. So you have to kind of dodge them, or you're going to crash, or you're going to go into these holes and go off the grid. And it does get, I won't lie, it does get quite difficult because, again, like I mentioned, the light cycle goes so quick that you don't have time to move. So you're constantly trying to, like, you're trying to be 10 steps ahead before you've seen the actual what's ahead. You know what I mean? You're trying to think, okay, so there might be something in front of me, there might not be, but I've got to try and think, if there is one, where am I going to move, left or right? You know what I mean? So it's your brain's constantly going, especially as you get further on to the final light cycle sort of part of the game, where literally you have really sharp corners, sharp bends. You have a jump that, unless you go, if you break at a certain time, I found this, if you break at a certain time, you will not be able to get enough speed to go over this ramp. The problem is, though, if you go too quick, you will get to that ramp at the same time one of those flying machines will get there, right? And you will hit it and you will die, and you have to do the whole thing over again. Generally, if you go too quickly, right, you will die. If you don't go quick enough, you will die. You've got to start over again, right? So you have to get at the right moment where you break. So it took me a while, but I managed to find the right part of that level where I knew I could brake, but have enough speed to get across the ramp, but also be slow enough to not for that plane to the animation for the plane to fly past, right, but fly past fast enough before I got there. I know it sounds quite complicated. Imagine what it was like for me having to constantly dying of not being too quick or being too quick and being like, that's unfair, that's not fair. So having to actually experiment while I'm doing this, die multiple times just to be like, okay, so if I brake at this corner, I will have enough speed to get round the other corners and get over the ramp, as well as missing the flying machine and not die and having to restart again, right? So there were moments like that. You also had moments where you was in a Tron tank, and those moments were kind of where the game started to slow down. It was very easy, even on the harder difficulties. It wasn't that hard because, like, a lot on all the tanks, it was two shots and the tanks were destroyed. You had tons of health. You had loads of enemies that would run at you as well. Tiny little, you could either run them over, you could shoot them, and they would all die in one hit kill. I like to think of these levels that they were put in there not just for the fun of it and not just to slow the game down, but also um, I feel like they were put in as kind of XP farms, because whenever you played these levels, you would always get double and triple XP for killing enemies, for killing tanks, for killing the flying machines overhead. You could shoot them down, and you would get tons of XP. So I usually would level up twice during these sections, and at the end of the game, I think the highest level you can get was like level 50. I managed by the end of this game, through one playthrough, when I played through it the first time, I managed to go up to level 20. Um, because you just get given XP like it's candy, because there's so much to unlock that they give you so much XP, and you only get like 2 points each time you level up. So generally this is one of those games where if you want to unlock everything, and there are achievements to unlock everything, you'd have to play multiple times, as well as you would have to play the multiplayer as well, because from my research I've seen you get double XP for playing the multiplayer. Again, multiplayer's dead, and the only way I could play it was if I played it with co-op with my brother. But overall, the game, when it works, it works. It's fun. Um, I like it. I really, really enjoy it. There are collectibles as well. You have these. I think they're called Abrax shards that you can find. You find them. They give you sort of their voice logs of Abrax, the main villain. I feel like I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but there are voice notes to him of how he feels about what he's doing, how he feels about the plot, how he feels about you, constantly getting under his skin, constantly being there where you shouldn't be, and obviously just gives more depth into the actual story. You also find these little I can't remember what they're called now, but you find these little collectibles hidden around the game that will give you sort of character sort of or character world sort of information. So you unlock them and you get to see more, learn more about the creator. You can learn more about Kevin Flynn. You can learn more about Clue. You can learn more about the world of Tron. You can learn more about the program. You can learn more about yourself. You can learn more about certain characters that you meet in the game. That sort of thing, really. Character bios, if anything. So you find them and you kind of learn more about the world that you're in, and you XP every time you find one. So it is worth finding them all. So the more XP you can get there. I only found a few. I didn't find them all but some of them are really hard to find, and some of them are really easy to find just from playing the game. They're right in front of you. So um, me as an achievement whore, I am tempted to go back with this game and just to kind of go on YouTube and cheat and kind of find a tutorial just to find them all, because it is worth 30 gamer score, and I am sort of tempted to go back and just to pick up the 30, pick up the 30 for the main collectibles, the 30 for picking up all the Abrax discs because I'm missing one. So it is kind of worth going back. So yeah, I might do. But overall, to wrap it all up, my overall thoughts of Tron Legacy is I like it. I enjoy it. This game is really, really good. Like I mentioned, the combat is fun. It's tight. It's challenging. It gets a lot more challenging when you are playing higher difficulty. But I always say to play this game, play play it on the casual difficulty first, and if you're interested enough, go back and play it on the more challenging difficulty, because by then you would have learned how best to make use of all your different abilities, all your different types of discs, how to best harness your free running and sort of get jump ahead of all the other sort of enemies and how best to defeat them. So it is worth doing that. Unless you want to challenge, just jump straight into the deep end and see how you do. The light cycle is quite fun when you play as a tank. It's kind of a fun little XP farm. The Prince of Persia free running again is fun. It's not always responsive and it can be a bit annoying sometimes, but when it works, it's quite interesting, quite fun. Even by the end of the game, I was finding that even though I knew how certain things worked and how certain mechanics worked with the free running, I was still making mistakes. So you will still sort of reach them, but again, when it works, it works. And yeah, overall, it's a fun game, and it's kind of a shame to see that propaganda games is no longer around. It would have nice to see what they'd done with the Pirates of the Caribbean license. It would have been nice to see what they do with a sort of Turok 2, where they would have took that story, what they would have done with it. I don't know, because again, like I mentioned, the Turok 1 story was very convoluted, and I'm not sure as to what they would have done with it. But it would have been nice to kind of maybe to see where. But yeah, maybe in another universe they're quite successful, and they're, somebody in another universe is currently playing and reviewing Pirates of the Caribbean for the Xbox 360. Who knows? But yeah, I enjoyed it and I highly recommend it. Like I said, I played it on next gen, so it was backwards compatible. So it ran on auto HDR. It had better frame rates, and it ran better, and it looked better because I was playing it on a next gen console. But that being said, the game still runs and looks fantastic on the 360. I even tried playing it on the 360. It looks great there. Again, couldn't recommend it more. And yeah, highly recommend going out, getting this game. It's currently out for cheap. Playing it, enjoying it, highly recommend. There's not much more I can say about it that's not positive. It's that good. And it's one of those rare few movie time games I generally enjoyed my time with. I wish the campaign was a bit longer. But from what we get, it's fun. I enjoy it. And yeah, go out, play Tron Evolution, go watch the Tron movies. Let Disney know we want more Tron, because we do want more Tron. We need more Tron. We deserve more Tron, and it just makes more sense that Tron would be more of a staple in the world that we currently live in. But that is my review of Tron Evolution for the Xbox 360. Hope you all enjoyed it, and yeah, let's go on to the end now. Let's wrap it all up, shall we? Right, so here we are at the end. Well, what did you think of this topic today? Like I said, I quite enjoyed Tron Evolution, but what did you think of it? Like, have you played it? Is it a game that you are looking forward to now? Is it a game that I've managed to convince you or not convince you? Um, as always, again, let me know on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. This game for me was not just a joy, but it was a vessel of what could be. As I mentioned, it pains me that we don't have a modern day sort of Tron game or Tron series, but it's nice that this game's backwards compatible, that it's playable on the next gen, that it's somewhat preserved. So even though we don't currently have a series, we have something that we can go back to. So that's nice. Um, because this game wasn't very well received. Like it got a lot of sixes and sevens, but like it didn't sell very well. The game sort of underperformed for Disney, and as I mentioned with Disney, if something underperforms, it is a loss. It completely fails. Even if it's beloved by a lot of people, it is still a fail. So they basically was like, bleh, get rid of it, gone. Which is a complete shame, but pardon me, but it is what it is. That's just the way Disney are. But yeah, as always, let me know what you think on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod. I'd love to hear your views of it. As always, you can find this podcast on Spotify. You can find me on Anchor. You can find me on Google Podcasts. You can find me on Amazon Music Podcasts. I'm also on Audible. So if you're on Audible, just type in the Nerdstalgic Podcast and you'll find my podcast there. I am on YouTube now. I'm currently at 48 subscribers. I recently did a live premiere for my Resident Evil Halloween special. That went quite well. I had 10 listeners. So for everybody who's who stuck around and listened to the premiere. Again, I know that it was almost about 2 hours long, so I didn't expect everybody to stay till the end. So those of you that did, thank you. And those of you that sort of popped in and out, again, I appreciate it. I wanted to give it a go, you know what I mean? But I do know next time if I'm going to do a premiere, I'll probably do it for a shorter episode, one that's under an hour, you know what I mean? Not going to be a very, very long one. But yeah, YouTube's going well. So on YouTube, if you type in Nerdstalgic_pod, if you type in the Nerdstalgic podcast and just look for my flaming face, I'm there. And I've got loads of my back catalogue. I finally caught up with myself. I'm currently up to date now on my YouTube and everywhere else. So you'll be able to find all of my episodes there, up to the quite recent ones. And yeah, that's about everything. Oh, also, if you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give me a rating. If you go down to the bottom of my page, actually, it's the top of my page, underneath my picture on Spotify, there is little stars. If you click the stars, it gives you the option to rate between 1 star and 5 star. 5 stars being the best you ever heard in your life. That 1 star basically being Vogons doing poetry, your ears are bleeding, and you want to die. That sort of thing, right? So, whatever you feel like is fair, 1 to 5 stars. It greatly helps me because then it puts me up the Spotify algorithm and gets my podcast advertised and seen by more people, which means I can do more fun and amazing things for you guys in the future. So that will greatly help me. And yeah, that's about everything really. My secret code word of the week is flabbergasted. So if you go on to Twitter and type in, if you send me a tweet that says flabbergasted, I will know that you listened to the Tron Evolution episode all the way to the end. As you guys know by now, if you've listened to the end, I've been doing this for the past few sort of episodes sporadically here and there, so I can see basically who listens to the end and who doesn't. As of yet, as a recording this episode on Friday, the 6th of November, Sunday, the 6th of November. Nobody as of yet has messaged me on Twitter with any of the code words. So I'm going to keep doing them until somebody does. And then when somebody does, then I'll have a little party and a little celebration with that one person or multiple people. We will see. But if you are listening to this, please do, because it'll just be a fun little game and it'll mess with other people and other people will be confused. And who doesn't want confused people on Twitter? Because most people are anyway, so let's confuse them more. So that's everything. So again, thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. So, see you later.